Hi. Hello.
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 Hello and welcome to Architecting.
The idea of a futurist, I think it was funny when Scott introduced you, said, yeah, he's a futurist. That's a real degree from a real university, you know? But like, is that, you got a degree in that? And that's
and how did that happen?
You went to high school and said, okay, you know what, I'm gonna.
In high school, I had a class called The Future.
Yeah.
And didn't know it was a career. I was gonna be a lawyer. And from 7th grade on, I wanted to be a lawyer. And then I did something really smart in my junior year of college. I got a job in the law library, and I found out what lawyers do for a living, which is fine if that's what you want to do. I would have been a horrible lawyer.
I saw your report card. Yeah.
I was never a good student, but I was always a good learner. And I got thousands of books, and that's one of the things I love, just pulling in things from all different angles.
Yeah. It was amazing in your talk. You had a self-portrait of yourself when you were 10 or something like that.
No, I think it was like
6,
7 or 8. Yeah.
And then you had your report card from the same time, and it was not a very high scoring report card, but it was interesting how they did those where there's that section of like tries hard essentially, or like turns things in, right? And you were across the board there, but the grades were low, and talking about saying your head's full of cobwebs, right? But it's like, yes, it is, because there's all these connections and all these things going across. And it's just about getting in that situation where you're able to use those skills in the way that your brain works.
Right. I'm incredibly lucky.
Yeah.
Because I make a living following my curiosity. I have spoken to everybody from the American Demolition Association to the Oklahoma National Guard, all over North America, into Europe, and I attend the conferences I speak at, and I'll be sitting there at an accounting conference taking notes, and people are like, what are you doing? I'm like, well, I'm not so much taking notes on that, but what they're saying is helping me think of other things.
Yeah.
And my job, to a great extent, is to connect ideas, particularly ideas that we think aren't connectable. And yesterday, Paul Doherty had quoted Leonardo da Vinci that you have to learn to see, because when you learn to see, you realize that everything can be connected.
Right, yeah.
That's a difficult leap at times, but we can go there.
I have ADHD, and I was sitting kind of front row there, and I had to be taking notes that whole time just to focus. And I put things out in yellow where I'm like, I want to talk to him about this. And now all my notes are just like yellow because there are so many things that you were talking about here.
Start with one.
Yeah. I'm just interested in this sort of like how you got into this. You were starting to talk a little bit about thinking about going into law, and then took a futures class, and then it kind of propelled you.
Well, I had the class in high school. And ever since I was old enough to read, I was reading science fiction. I was born in 57. In 67, Star Trek came out. And my parents were strict in that we could only watch 1 hour of TV during the week, and then Friday, Saturday, and then Disney World on Sunday. And I snuck downstairs and hid behind the couch to watch Star Trek because my older brother had really good grades. So my first memory of Star Trek was Sideways.
So you majored in futurism.
I have an undergrad in political science and philosophy, a master's degree in futures research, studies of the future. It comes by a variety of names.
And so when you graduate from grad school, where did that take you?
So I got an internship at Johnson Controls and to finish up the degree with. And they actually hired me, so I got paid to do my internship. And you meet someone new out of college, young person, frequently you will ask, what'd you major in? And when I would say, studies of the future, I'd either get a really blank look, or could you talk to my Rotary Club about that?
Oh, yeah.
And I started speaking at service clubs, and then without warning, somebody gave me a $40 honorarium. And I'm like, you'll pay me? So it literally is a hobby that got out of control.
I've got a lot of cobwebs here. You're paying me for these? Yeah. Yeah. Well, there's so many questions there of like, then how does it keep going and connect? And, but it seems like just spending 5 minutes with you here, like a connector's brain is a connector in life, and finding these opportunities and finding these people.
So tomorrow I'm going to be doing a breakout on process and presentation. Because my friends, like when I say something, like, how did you make that leap? And one of the guys, I'm not a designer, I've not taken design, I didn't know what he meant by my process. So one day he just stood there with a pad of paper, and he kept asking me questions. And then he had 2 sheets, and he handed it off, and he goes, there's your process. And he said, do a talk on that. But in terms of one of my first slides shows the things that I'm very interested in. It's everything from mythology to politics to design to Art Deco to fairy tales. And you just begin to weave a story. And I don't know how I learned this, other than, my mom used to say, it was the Irish part of me, the gift of gab. And the first talk I gave was to the School of Education at University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. And I sat on this edge of this table and I had my leg wrapped around the leg of the table because my foot was doing this. This was a learned thing. Anybody can learn to speak, and if you start out terrified, you can overcome that. If you have the desire, because I knew I had things to say.
Yeah.
And early on, you get very negative reaction from people in the audience. And you kind of have to go, well, okay.
That's your opinion. Yeah.
You just kind of have to let it slough off. And I show in the program tomorrow where some woman had written in the reviews at the end of the conference that your words were like poetry. And then people were like, oh, that's funny. And then the next one is, worst speaker I've ever heard in my life. There were 3 of those in the reviews. They were from the same conference.
Yeah.
So everybody comes in with a different perspective.
Yeah, this is somebody who doesn't like poetry. You're saying you're kind of like moving into retirement or like doing less speaking or something. Like this time, when you're talking about the future, to me, it seems like you spoke about this being possibly like the next new renaissance, right? Mm-hmm. Of this boom of new technology and ideas. You've been doing this for a while now. Does this time feel like exponentially crazier future projection, or we're always excited or interested in the future for the last 50 years?
There are things that are profoundly different. Look, one of the reasons I decided to get out, because everybody's talking about blockchain, and I don't understand blockchain. And AI, I was reading about it, but wasn't trying it until a friend of mine got laid off and then was using AI to help write his resume and all the convoluted things that you do where the company uses an AI filter to read your resume. And so you got 2 AIs coming at each other. And then, but he was so excited about it. I said, well, how do you start? He goes, you go to claudeai.ai and just type in a question. So I started doing it, and then I started doing more. And I think, so there's been more interest from my legacy clients, particularly with the AIA. And I will always speak to AIA just because they have literally been my favorite group of people to talk to, particularly the students. They were fun. And I want to do more writing. And I wrote an article for architectural students back in 2012 called Maybe the Future is Just Not That Into You. And I want to expand that because I think that there are a lot of things, they're so overwhelmed. And a constant thing that the students would say to me after an AIS talk is, how come no one talks about this with us?
Yeah. And I think where you're interesting, Paul yesterday was talking about sort of the future and talking about sort of technologies. It's interesting hearing you talk with the background more in philosophy and kind of stepping back. And it's not like you're coming to us and saying, here's what the future is and here's these old technologies. But it's kind of like the thing that you kept coming back to that was interesting of like, just because you're pushing towards something, is it good, right?
Yeah, how do you know if it's good or not?
And I think that's where a lot of the anxiety comes for everybody, right? Of like, hey, I'm getting left behind and I need to do this. Wait, do I need to do this? I don't know. There's not enough time to even think about it.
Right.
If it's good or bad or,
And we're so busy, and I find this constantly with architects, is that they want to do things, but the pace of it doesn't let them. And you find this in every industry, is that like right now, we really need to be not so busy, to take time, to go out for lunch, to have conversations with others and conversations within yourself.
Yeah. And that's the thing of AI's sort of promise of saying, hey, we'll take a lot of this off your plate, but then it's like, oh, I can do so much more, and I need to be doing so much more because of this. And the idea of slowing down is so difficult.
Have you seen the meme? In the future, I want AI. I don't want AI to do my work or to do the art and the poetry. I want to do that. You can do the dishes and mow the lawn.
Yeah, exactly.
And this has to be articulated. We have to be talking about this more.
Right. Yeah. And it's just the thing of, it's come about so abstractly that it's so hard to grapple with. And I thought that your one statement about sort of like, okay, well, what's that 20% that's unique to you, right? Like, what are the things that AIs can't do? And how are you able to shed the rest of that and build that up? Does that seem to be resonating with students or with everybody?
It has. When I was speaking to AIA large states, there were a couple of architects that were very concerned because they took that as a literal thing that 80% of their work is going to go away. That's the potential, but we never quite live up to that potential. And that's why I do talk about that we need sort of an apologetics of design. Can you defend what it is that you do best and that needs to be human? One of the points I made about so much architecture today just looks like a technical drawing. There's no artistry. And that's something that architects can do, but they have to learn to defend it against all the people who go, well, we don't have enough money, or that's frivolous.
Yeah.
It's not.
Yeah, I thought that was really interesting of when you showed the building that was next to you and you said, like, this is ugly, why can't we have more beauty? And to me, I looked at it and I was like, I see the rationality of that building. I see that they're pushing it forward and this way and this way. I see the detailing and I'm like, that's not that bad, And I'm obsessed with this idea of goodness within architecture. What is architecture, A, and what is goodness, right?
Sure.
And even there, right, with that building, it's subjective, the idea of beauty and
But is it
goody.
all subjective? I mean, there are measurable ways to identify beauty, things like symmetry. And that building isn't bad. I like the fact that they salvaged the bricks. But you can find essentially the same building in any city around. They're all becoming alike. I'm fascinated. I think the last great design style was Art Deco. Mid-century modern was kind of a softened variation of that, but that style was so full of optimism and artistry, and there was it came out of a time of poverty, but it was also this time of exploration and discovery. It was like, yes, we can do this. And then World War II came along and crushed a lot of those hopes. We still have to try.
Would you say the same thing if every city was full of just Art Deco buildings?
I wouldn't like that.
Yeah, right.
I like the variety, and I think there's lots of variations. I don't want, for instance, just federal style. I want a variety, and I think there are new designs to come out. But in part, I talked a lot about play. We have to be a little bit more playful, and we have to be less dependent upon the computer, because the computer is going to guide those designs. And I remember talking to a recent architectural graduate that was working down in New Mexico, and how it was just this: you grab this, you drop it here, you grab this, and like all these windows look the same, all the doorways look the same. Really? Can't we?
Yeah.
And you think 3D printing would offer a lot of potential?
Yeah, I think that the idea of play and the idea of there's either cobwebs being brushed out in my head right now, or they're trying to make a desperate connection. Okay, so what you were saying was that the computer is pushing us towards sameness. Yeah, and I think that like industrialization pushed us towards sameness in the repeatable units of things, right? And the efficiencies of the economy and such. I think in that sense, generative AI is really interesting in either that you can argue it's going to push us towards more sameness because it's about a popularization of image and style, right?
Sure.
But it's also, I remember the first time seeing some of these AI images, and I was like, I have absolutely no idea how somebody modeled that. It's so intricate and so crazy, right? Because if it's directed in the right way, it can come up with something you've never seen before, right?
And I remember, is it Damon Lamont?
I don't know.
Architect, I think, from New Mexico. He spoke at AIA Wisconsin. And, people will come in with something from AI and say, can you build this? And he would go, literally, no, we cannot build this. This cannot be built.
Right, yeah. Yeah.
And it's good for iteration, to try things out. One of the things I brought up is I still am passionate about still being able to do sketching. And I will tell architects, you're giving up the one skill I'm jealous of. And I see a lot of articles where they talk about the value of how the brain works through the hand. And that you don't want to lose that. You want to enhance that. That may be part of that 20% that can't and shouldn't be automated. What can we do with that?
Yeah. And that 20%, it's funny you say that. I've just been struggling with that this last week, where I have my own small firm, and it's kind of funny because the name of it's High-Low Buffalo, and so it comes from the game we play with our little kids of what's the high of your day, what's the low of your day, and then what's the buffalo, which is the interesting, weird, unique thing that happened in your day.
Really? That's neat.
And so the idea of like, I want to be chasing buffalo. That's what I'm interested in, those weird, interesting, so it goes well with you. But I've been working with my business coach on being able to articulate, an elevator pitch for the firm. What is special about us, right? And how do we do it? And I push that thing off every week, like I don't want to work on it. And I was talking to my therapist. I was like, I don't know why this is. And she's like, it's because you have to take the thing that's true and real in you, and you have to put it out into the world where it's delicate, and it could get crushed, right? It could get
You ever read the book Art and Fear?
No.
David Sales, I think, is one of the, it's two authors, but they just talk about how so often people go through art school and the last art they produce is for the senior show. And that fear, the way, like, you have to put yourself out, and it means being judged.
Right.
But we have to have good, like, a good network where we can safely play. Because I talk about that you have to make mistakes in order to create the future. But you want to learn your mistakes small and soon rather than too big and too late.
Right.
We don't want master architects making big mistakes, even though every building has.
Right. Yeah. And it's funny because, I'll type into ChatGPT, who am I? What's my elevator pitch? And it comes up with like 10% of something good and then garbage, right? But it's that thing for all of us, I think, of this age is pushing us towards figuring out what is that 20% and being able to articulate.
Hope it's pushing us that way.
Yeah.
But I think there's so much pressure to just go along and take the easy route. I one time a client asked me, do you have a talk description and learning objectives? Otherwise, if not, I have this. And I was just going out for the evening, and so I read it over and went, oh, that's pretty good. And then the next morning I looked at it, and it was just pablum. It was a very generic futurist. And so I rewrote it and made it funny. And she loved it. And I said, did you use AI? She goes, yeah, a little bit. We do it because we're busy.
Yeah.
And we need to, again, we have to take some time, and we have to have more support from those in charge to try things. And Austin Kleon, who wrote Steal Like an Artist, he said creative people need time to sit around and do nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny. The two takeaways from the at the end was you said people need to take up smoking and need to drink more, right?
Let me explain that.
No, okay. Thank you for your time.
But I do that as a joke because it captures like, what? Smoking?
Yeah, right.
Smokers talk to strangers and they take breaks. And while they're taking a break, we're back there working. Smokers also, because they're a reviled minority, we hate smokers and we are proud of our hatred of smokers.
Right.
Smokers know that. And so when they see each other, they have instant friends and they can bum a cigarette.
Right.
And then the thing about drinking is, when I would put it in a graphic, when I would show that finally, it was a coffee cup. I said, could be coffee. But it's that idea that it means going out for lunch, being more in your community. When you break bread, you break barriers. There is something in our essence that understands that and knows that sharing meals is part of who we are and who we need to be in order to be more human. Because otherwise we get isolated, and the average American worker spends less than 15 minutes having lunch, and it's at their desk with their computer. The term recreation is recreation. When you take that pause, I'm going to get re-energized and go back out there.
Yeah. So, you brought up all your engagement with the AIA and on the AIA National Board. When you present this message to most architects or to the AIA, what's the pushback? What's the most of the pushback you're getting, or what's the most of the response that you're hearing from?
I mean, it's always been very positive overall. I get pushback when I insist that buildings have to have more beauty, because there's every excuse in the book, and I get that. But if it's just going to look like a technical drawing, that will get automated. And so you've got to expand your repertoire of how you explain things so that you can defend that architecture is not just a box. It is the most public of all arts, and we need art in our lives. G.K. Chesterton said that art was the signature of man. It is the one thing that distinguishes us most, that we can create beautiful things. And you look at the cave paintings. They didn't have PhDs, they didn't have master's degrees, and yet somehow they created beautiful art. It is in us, and we must bring that out. And when I speak at AIA conventions, frequently there's an art show of architects who I think don't get to express enough of the artistic side, so they find another avenue for it.
Well, yeah, it was interesting when you said that. I think in this elevator pitch that I'm developing, part of it is saying, hey, if you want the most efficient and the most cost-effective building, I'm not your architect, and it's saying I make extraordinary pieces of sanctuary for people to live in, like that, like trying to articulate whatever that is. There is such a huge portion of architecture that has been commoditized, and that's what it is, right? And yes, there should be art everywhere, and we should have it, and there's me going on my excuses about developers and money and everything, but
we've been able to produce so much more.
Yeah.
But could we try? Just a little bit, that 20%, just a little, 20% more effort into making things beautiful.
Yeah.
And why not?
Yeah. And that's what drives most architects to smoke and drink is the why not? Why can't I be more artistic in the work that I do,
Yeah. But there should be courses offered at AIA conferences on how to present. That's how I ended up creating the presentation skill one, because I was at a crit in New Mexico, and the student did an okay job, but hadn't practiced. And I looked around the room, and I said, look, I'm probably the oldest guy in the room. I'm the guy with the checkbook. And if you've pissed me off, why would I write a check to you? And one of the professors stood up in the middle of my response and said, we teach design, not sales.
You're not going to get much design.
Yeah.
Because, yeah.
That's post-audience architecture.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I love what you're saying. Like I was obsessed with Where's Waldo when I was growing up, and just staring at that page and all of the little characters and all the little micro stories going on. And so I've taught seminars on that where I have them create massive tapestries about a place, and it has a narrative running through it. It has architecture, and it's cut in different ways. Or the last studio I've taught, they had to present 5-minute video for each thing instead of drawings, right? And so they had to craft this thing. And I'm very passionate about, there's such richness within architecture. There can be such richness that the general public doesn't understand or know or see. And like you're saying, we need to be better at presenting that and telling an engaging story that people want to listen to and care about.
So that the term citizen architect is sometimes referred to as an architect who goes, runs for office. But to me, a citizen architect is someone who is a citizen in their community and not just trying to be the leader, always the leader, but it is to be a participant in a community and offer what you can so that people understand architects better, but also architects need to understand people. There's so much sort of isolation. George Bernard Shaw said, all professions are a conspiracy against the laity. Well, and so much of the technology is now breaking some of that down so that, I can go to the computer and have it do a lot of things for me where I don't have to go to somebody else. And to a certain extent, there's a problem with that in that we need to be relying on other people.
Yeah.
And it's what else can we do that we couldn't do before together?
Yeah. Yeah. What a time to be alive, right?
Yes.
It is just crazy. Like especially in school, I thought a lot about the beginning of modernism within architecture and being like, man, I wish I was alive then, right? There's so much excitement that you look at the Bauhaus versus this school that was built 2 years before, such an extreme difference, right? And it does seem to sort of, you have your kind of classical mannerist into reinvention in the cycle, and it kind of is like almost 100 years, right? We're back at that kind of 25s. and we're here. You had defined future as a playful negotiation.
Yeah, the future is not fixed. And I'm a futurist, and I don't know the future. And if I, with a degree in futurism, doesn't know the future, where does that leave you? And quite often we are left susceptible to the articulate incompetence who are trying to sell you something.
Articulate incompetence or fear, right? I mean, yeah.
So much is driven by fear and greed.
Right. So what's the message from this very experienced futurist? The ending message for this talk of what the playful negotiation for the future. Give me a better future of the question I just asked you.
Oh, sure. I talk a lot about curiosity and the idea of what else do you need to be curious about. And curiosity involves, I think, a lot of play. So just be playful in what you're learning. And you said you have kids? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So they are little learning sponges. And so paying attention to them and playing some of that adventure, to be able to put yourself sort of in the shoes, as it were, of your children, to see the world through a child's eyes, with awe, with innocence. We get bored with life as we go older. Yeah. I mentioned Chester before. He said that a little child is fascinated with everything. That, that as an older child needs a story where Johnny opens the door and sees a dragon. But the 3-year-old finds it magical that Johnny opened a door. Yeah. And so we are surrounded by magical things, and we're waiting for our intellect and our emotions to catch up with it. It's always an adventure, and it is a very trying time. Thomas Paine, one of the founding parents, said, "These are the times that try men's souls." Well, he's never been wrong yet. And I don't know about you, but my parents were alive during World War II. That was a lot more threatening.
Yeah.
They're very existential threats. We have threats that we don't know what to do.
Yeah, that may or may not be existential.
Yeah, when the entire world is open,
right,
and you have to choose, but you've never been taught how to make good decisions, particularly with that, what I talked about, the implications times 3. We're good at going, if this, then that. But where sort of the futurism realm comes in is, and then what? And then what? And to think of all these possibilities, not that you are going to be able to predict the future, but it's sort of like what a coach teaches you in terms of play in sports. You don't know what the opposition is going to do, but you learn enough plays so that you learn to think in the moment. And it's the planning, not the plan, that becomes important in terms of how we live our lives.
Yeah. Well, you left us with some awe today and good things to think about. So I really appreciate you coming to the conference and talking with us here.
Thank you. Thanks for being here.
I am constantly just obsessed with this idea of good architecture, and took a few philosophy classes in grad school and stuff. But
cool.
I mean, not enough to really understand anything. But thinking about getting back into it to try, I don't know, better define the idea of good. And I know it's such a big word, right, with so many meanings.
Right.
Do you have any?
Well, there's no singular definition of good.
But there has to be such a history of discussion of goodness, right?
Sure.
Within philosophy and what are the tracks, or any suggestions there if I'm trying to dive into that?
Well, I talk about the need for both philosophy and theology. And it's not that you are going to find the answers, but sometimes just asking the questions and engaging and playing around with that. Again, playing with that as opposed to, I will find the answer, the meaning of life.
Someone knows what good is, and I'm going to find that. Yeah, exactly.
And, my definition of what is good architecture is going to be different from somebody else. And that's more than good. That's great. But I want more respect for a variety. And that this idea that we can throw away the past is, it's such an ego trip to think that you can ignore thousands of years of history. You learn from it. You figure out what parts can we do again, and others never again. There's a marvelous book by Christopher Woodward, I believe is his name, called In Ruins. And it's all about why are we fascinated with ruins. And that, one of the things ruins teach us is, you can have great success, great civilizations, and no matter how great they were, they die. And part of the reason they die is because we become bored. We no longer believe in it. Someone once said that Rome was not great. People didn't love Rome because it was great. Rome was great because people loved it. You know, and that you have to want to preserve and protect something, and that requires commitment and sacrifice, believing in. And I talked about the difference between optimism and hope.
Right. Yeah.
Optimism is a practical thing. Things are going your way. You hope they continue to go your way. The great power of hope is you still have hope even when things are hopeless. You fight the hopeless battles and still hope to win. And the things that we are struggling against are nothing compared to what many people have faced before.
What's next for you?
This is my last talk of the year.
Yeah.
And so it was funny, I came up with that idea of the Turing paradox.
Right.
When the machines get smarter, we can decide to get dumber. And I was playing with AI about that I wanted, what are some things that go with it? And it said, oh, sure. And it wrote me an article. I was like, no, you're missing the point.
And said, just take it. Just take it. Life will be easier.
Yeah. Resistance is futile.
Yeah.
But I said, no, I don't want you to write it. I want you to help me figure out what points to make. And it said, good point. I will go into my edit mode. I was like, oh, yeah. And using it to flesh out ideas, to explore ideas, that's its strength, I think, in terms of writing.
Right.
The idea of it writing for me, I'm like, no. But can you be as Ethan Mullock in the Co-Intelligence book, it's a coworker that doesn't necessarily know who it is, so you kind of have to help it. It's this interplay, play, that we take some of these things to see, where else can I take this idea? What am I not seeing? And that is, I think, for a writer, is kind of a cool thing to go, oh, I hadn't thought of that.
Well, it just has to be like a third arm you didn't know that you needed, right? It's just been so crazy in the last, year and a half, 2 years of I put everything through ChatGPT now. What was I doing before? But,
yeah. And then does it free up time, or do you just fill it in with more work? And, the idea that we should, we made a grave error in that we made work fun. We're good at work. We are so good at it. And we want to devote ourselves to that. And we miss out on so much of the day-to-day things. And just,
You're talking to an architect, married to an architect who both love architecture. And my job's too fun. And I'm my own boss, and I can go down whatever rabbit hole I want. And
And there are worse fates in terms of you are, in charge of your life. You have a companion who understands at least that part of you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. There's the high-low buffalo, yeah.
Soulful design.
A lot of my taglines say something about, it's like high-low buffalo, soul-stirring architecture. That's kind of the closest that I've got to of that's what I'm interested in. It's and that's where even more where I'm throwing around the idea of soulful or kind of sanctuary or soul-stirring, and I'm and I wanted to find that,
Sure.
And for me, I'm okay, I want to be able to articulate what that is. But then at a certain point, it's kind of with beauty. It's it's not an academic thing where you're trying to drill down into this thing.
But Adam,
forever.
where did that come from? The idea of the soulful.
Yeah. I mean, I think that I have been so inspired and dedicated my life to architecture because of these powerful moments of space that I've been in that are transformative, or and even just the idea, like you're saying, of bad repeated design versus something crafted by an amazing architect, and the effect that can have on somebody's daily life. I want to stir their soul every day in that space that they're in, and create something that's a glove for how they live. That's why I've never been at a firm longer than 2 years, and that's why I keep jumping around.
I've never been able to hold down a job longer than an hour or two.
Cheers. It's the cobwebs. Yeah.
So in that book, In Ruins, they talk about the Colosseum. and how after Rome fell, it was a site of pilgrimage. There were all sorts of flora and fauna there, and there were hermits living in there.
Sheep grazing.
And that and it was a site of what is referred to as assignation, meaning couples would go and meet there at night. And then they cleaned it up. And so what remains is a carcass. You know, this skeleton of what was.
Carcass,
and what he concludes, Christopher Woodward in this book, is that no one writes poetry about it anymore. And so he's talking about that there is a need for ruins in this sense of amor fati, to love your fate and to know that, actually not amor fati, memento mori, remember you are mortal. And having some of those reminders that we can reach for the sky, we can go to the moon, we can build all these things, and yet we will die. And that's okay. But we are here to do something, and if we can do something beautiful, something cool, something good, something, any variety of things. You know, I don't think of accountants as, you know, being motivated by beauty necessarily, at least in their work, although some of them are, quite creative.
Beautiful spreadsheets. You know, when you said buildings look like Excel docs, and I'm like, well, to some people, those Excel docs that are really clean, it's their own art to it. But you know, that idea of ruin, it just makes me think of, like, you know, these beautiful white sculptures that we think of, right? That used to be painted to be lifelike, right? And that was shed, and then we think that this is the point of beauty and of antiquity, right? But it's a
was it actually
meaning,
gaudy?
Right? Yeah, it was actually gaudy, and yeah. So I don't know, but man, this has been fun.
Cool.
Thank you.
Yeah, I've enjoyed it. Thank you.